Hello, hello. We're back. Happy New Year. It's 2024 now, and we took a week off from streams to get some heads down, coding time during the holidays. But we're back. Last stream we were. What even were we doing? Um, we were working on. Oh yes, a typing game called Word Wars. I got a bunch of your feedback on how it plays, what you would like to see in it, just like kind of general game feel stuff. We implemented a lot of feedback, and we now have it up on itch.io if you guys want to play it. If you want to play the game we built last week, you can head on over to chromagolem.itch.io, and it's just this Word Wars top demo, very first demo here. Feel free to click it, and you know what? We're starting the stream. Let's play a little bit just to show it off. If you missed the last week or two of streams when we were working on it, this was just a quick little game. The gist is basically it's a 1v1 typing game. You spawn units that run to the enemy base. They spawn units that run to your base. Units do battle in the middle. If they make it to their enemy's base, they attack the enemy's base. Pretty basic, but the type of game twist on it is every unit has a word above its head. So you can spawn all these units, and they each are good against certain other units. You can implement a little bit of strategy to what words you're typing if you want, or you can just go ham and type them all. And just type real fast, win the game. Fun little demo we made. There's no AI or anything in it, but we're going to come back to it sometime, probably in January. Andrew's going to help me with some of the multiplayer libraries that he's been working on. We're going to hook it up so you guys can play 1v1 against us or other people or whoever you want to flex your typing skills at. But I will go ahead and play just a quick game, show it off, since we spent a couple weeks building it on stream. Also, a quick note is I'm using a new mic this week, just testing it out. I know in previous weeks a few people have said that I sound a little bit quiet. I'm hoping this new mic helps out a bit with that. So if I'll listen to it after the stream, and I've listened to it a little bit, but I think it sounds better. If I still sound quiet, let me know. I can boost the volume a little bit. I can just start screaming. You know how it is. Let's play a little bit of a game. So you can you just press enter. It brings up a little input to type a word. You got your resources up in the top right, and spawning units cost resources. If you defeat an enemy unit, it refunds the spent resources back to you. So if the enemy spawns a bunch of sharpshooters, if you kill all those, you get a bunch of gas. If they spawn a bunch of stone guards, if you kill all those, you get a bunch of minerals, and so on. This is going much easier than expected, given that I'm not even typing. So I'm gonna, and I'm seeing some bugs now that we're playing it live on stream. Maybe there was some balance issues here, but I guess they are coming back now. Sharpshooters, they're strong against wizards, or they're supposed to be at least. We got absolutely rolled that game because I just, started talking instead of playing. Let's give that once more a shot. Let's do a little bit more of a balanced unit composition, and let's actually type, So that was a lot easier. Last week we were working a little bit on balancing. We didn't quite nail that down, apparently. But, I mean, that's basic gist of the game. It'll be a lot more fun, I think, when it's human versus human, because it's kind of hard to balance, like, the enemy destroying your units by typing, because your options are basically give it a static rate, like we've done here, where they just destroy a unit every, like, 3 to 5 seconds, or you can match it to, like, the player's rate, which is probably what we should do in the meantime, but I think really the player versus player is going to be more fun, because it's actually based on, can you type faster than the enemy person, yes or no. But that is what we've built the last couple weeks. It's called Word Wars. Go check it out at chromagolem.itch.io. While you're there, we also have 2 other demos. They're a little more AI centric. We have Smack to the Future, which we built for a game jam, for the AI in Games game jam a while back. That was a 1-week project where it's more of a retro brawler, like think the old Nintendo's Double Dragon, that sort of thing, where you're fighting on the streets, but eventually police show up, and you get this sort of AI conversational twist where you need to convince the police that you're actually innocent in order to go on to the next level. So the more people you've beat up, obviously you have a higher score, but it's harder to convince the police you're innocent. So there's a little bit of back and forth on strategy there. That was the very first demo we built. Then we kind of ramped that up to You Are Not Alice. Whereas Smack to the Future was just you're basically trying to lie to one person, the police. In You Are Not Alice, you take on the role of a hacker who's infiltrated a large corporation. So you have control of Alice's computer, and you have access to talk to all of her coworkers, access all of her files, send files to people, really do whatever you want in this large network. And so the gameplay of that revolves more around talking to Alice's coworkers, convincing them, hey, can you run this file real fast, blah, blah, blah. If they run the virus file you send them, then you gain access to their computer. You have then access to all of their coworkers, and so on. So we basically took this one-on-one AI conversational mechanic that we built in Smack to the Future. People really loved lying to people, so we built that into a whole web of people that you can lie to, you can convince to run viruses, you can get people fired, you can browse through their files and look for juicy documents that they've written about other people and send them to people, and they'll respond to it. And all the file systems generated with AI, and the conversations are from AI. So it's kind of like all the people have the same personality every game, but the exact files that you get and conversations you have are new every time. So we were exploring a lot more with kind of blending those AI tools into new mechanics, trying to unlock new strategy components and new like gameplay possibilities. I see you in the chat, Andrew. Thanks for joining in. It's not a new webcam. I just have a very cloudy sky today, so it's a lot better lighting. But I'm glad the audio is a huge improvement. Good. Yeah. So I'll go ahead and jump into this game, or this week's game. What we've built here so far is kind of a very, very simple prototype. I guess I'll show you around, I'll walk around what we have, and then I'll talk about what we're going to do on stream today. But basically, if you think back to the expansion from Smack to the Future to You Are Not Alice, we went from conversing to one person who has a much higher like power dynamic over you to a whole network of people where you're more equal. There's a little bit of variance in some people, like people's bosses. You have a little bit less of a power. What's the term? Delta over them. Some people, if you like take over a boss's computer, you can talk to their interns and really easily convince them to run your files and so on. So we want to play a little bit more with power dynamics in this demo, and we're bringing it back down to 1 or 2 people. The gist is you wake up in this empty room. It's first person kind of horror walker simulated type thing. And there'll be a few things that you can pick up. We'll have there's a little lighter on the ground for a light source. You'll see that he's holding. I haven't really done like the flames or anything and all that. Just kind of blocking it out for now. But basically you wake up, you're in this locked room. You're not sure how you got here. Once you pick up a little light source and explore the room a little bit, you'll see in this corner there's a little air vent. And so what will happen is you'll start to hear a voice from the cell over of somebody talking to you. So that's your first kind of pairing of who you're talking to. Their conversation will be powered by AI. And so we're going to focus a little more on like guiding the conversation rather than leaving it open-ended like in the previous demos. The first goal, obviously they're going to be very surprised to hear somebody else. They've been in this cell for a while now, so they're going to either be convinced that you're like whoever put them in that cell and they're finally hearing somebody, or that's probably most realistic. I think the first goal we'll go with is maybe you crouch down over here and talk to them for a while, and you need to convince them that you're just like another person in the cell. You're not sure how you got here. We'll probably have like a suspicion meter that you need to adjust through your conversation by like convincing them, hey, I'm not the bad guy. I'm in the same boat you are. And so we are going to try and like stabilize that power shift to where you and the person in the other cell are kind of on the same level. But then once you've successfully completed a goal or two in convincing them that you are not the bad guy, not the big bad guy, we also have this little camera up here that you'll be able to talk to the bad guy from. So I haven't really thought through the goals of like talking to them, but obviously there's a really big power dynamic there of they have captured you in some way. They've locked you in this room. How are you going to convince them to let you out, or like find out what they want, or something along that nature. So we'll have like a list of goals that you're kind of railroaded through as a player. And we'll have a little finale that uses them both. I'll talk about in a second, but just to walk through, why not stick it into first person and talk it through? But this is kind of what I'm thinking. If you guys have ideas for other like effectively mini games that you can play through talking, either to like a cellmate or a killer, or to yourself, like maybe a mouse that comes out of the wall, whatever, we're just kind of playing around with what's possible here and seeing what's fun. But basically you wake up in this room, you can walk around, you can crouch, crawl, whatever, run. You got a little bit of a light source so you can check stuff out. You can right click to zoom in on stuff. Sorry, I zoomed in on the toilet. Eventually we'll have some stuff under the bed that you'll like find throughout the course of talking to the killer. But we'll walk through just real quick like what the whole gameplay process will be from start to beginning. Basically you're gonna wake up here. You're not gonna have this lighter quite yet. I'm just building the light source now, and it's it's pretty rough to walk around in the room without it, especially if I'm streaming. I don't want to give you guys just a black screen. But basically, you'll be like, "Hey, what the heck is this? Where am I going?" We've got this flickering light over here to kind of subconsciously signal to the player, like, "Hey, come check out this side of the room." There's not really a lock on this side of the room. We got the locked door that we'll do some interactive triggers of like, you can try and open the door. It'll say it's locked. You can try and do stuff and it'll respond. But you've got this camera that just kind of paces back and forth. Occasionally it'll switch to like tracking the player, which is kind of fun. We'll have just a few objects in the room that you can kind of interact with. But the goal is you come back, you've kind of explored this room. We want to give this kind of jail cell feeling of there's nothing to do here. But we want you to find this lighter here, and then you'll pick it up. You get this light source. Then you can kind of inspect the room a little bit more. We'll have a little bit more of these objects that you can kind of interact with. But once you have the light source, this lighter here, you can go over and push this out of the way, find this air vent here, and that light that comes through the vent is what will trigger the person in the next cell to be like, "Hey, is there someone there? Like, who is that? What are you doing to me? Why am I here?" And so on. So they're gonna be terrified. They're gonna be scared. It's, I mean, a horror, psychological horror game. I'm not really big on like the gore stuff, so I really want to play into just like creeping people out, making you feel terrified. But I'll probably do some sort of little toggle here so you can have a better view when you're talking through the vent, instead of having to hold control to crawl here like I am. But at this point, you've reached the first like objective in the game. You've explored the room, you've found the light source, and you've triggered this conversation with the cellmate. So they're gonna be scared. You're gonna say like, "Hey, I don't know why I'm here either. I'm locked in here." And so the first goal here is convince them that you are not the bad guy. And so once that's done, maybe we'll have one other like more open-ended goal of like, tell them about yourself. And really what I want to do with that is let the player express some like, I mean, almost metadata of like, you can either tell them about your real self or this character that you're making up. And then we want to use AI to kind of take in some of those features or facts into the game world. So if you get a little pop-up in the corner up here saying like, "Hey, you want to calm them down, tell them about yourself," and you're like, "Hey, I'm a farmer from Iowa. I'm 55 years old. I don't know what I'm doing here. I was just at the pub or the bar, and then I woke up in this bed." That's a simple example, but we can transcribe what you say or what you type, however you want to interact with this chat system. And then we can have some background prompts that say like, "Hey, what kind of fears would a farmer from Iowa have? Like, they're probably not very afraid of the dark if they're working in the fields at night." So, I mean, that's a bad example, but if they were afraid of the dark, that's something that could trigger like these lights to go out more often or more frequent or for longer durations. If they're afraid of like bugs, which again they probably aren't because they're a farmer, we could spawn in some like bugs crawling on the walls occasionally. What would a farmer be afraid of? Maybe like, I mean, I guess it's a horror game, so we can go there. We can say like their family's probably safety. So we could play some like audio sounds of like their husband or wife like yelling on the other side of the door or something like that, where you've taken this innocuous story that they've told an NPC character about themselves or about this character that they're role playing as, and we can incorporate that into the game world and say like, hey, what are the fears they might have? Like, what are their what's their like goals? What do they want? And then obviously we can't infer everything from that. But since they're having a conversation with this person, we do have the opportunity to feed that back into the conversation AI as well. So it won't just be like a monologue from them to the enemy character, or the other character, and then we change this world. We can say like, hey, this kind of feels like a hospital. I don't like hospitals. I don't know, but or I'm just coming up with these examples off the top of my head. So let me just say, if we, as the player, say like, hey, where are we? It feels like a hospital. Like the AI that is taking the player's chat and trying to come up with fears and motivations and things, it might not be able to infer whether the player likes hospitals or not because they just commented on hospitals. But one avenue that we can take is to feed that conversation back to this dialogue that we're having with the AI NPC, and then we can prompt them to say like, yeah, it does feel like a hospital. Like that really freaks me out. How does it make you feel? It's kind of a cheesy way to ask it, but that's a way that we can use this in-game conversation to have the player expand on very specific things that we want to know about. Like if very specific examples, you can say like, yeah, this feels like a hospital. We prompt them to say like, yeah, I really don't like hospitals. The bed always freaks me out. And then you now have a prompt of like, yeah, I don't really care about the bed, but just the blank walls are what freaks me out. And then suddenly all these walls just go straight blank. Something like that, where we have a lot of kind of props that we can play with. We have some things set up like this little guy here. If you turn around, he moves sometimes he doesn't. This thing is now not tracking the player, but maybe if they mention like feeling watched, or they just want to be alone or something like that, we can trigger this guy to track the player around the room. You can see actually in the bottom left of my screen where toggling between the camera following the player and the not following the player for random amounts of time, but that'll very quickly switch over to following the player. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of the first two objectives. Are talking to this other cellmate effectively. Camera is now following the player, so as you move around the room, it follows you. I'll probably add a little blinking red light as well. But after you've completed these objectives, what you're going to see is, or hear, is a voice coming from the camera. So now at this point, we know a little bit about the player, both from what they've told us, also how they've interacted with the room. Like, have they inspected everything? Are they very meticulous, or like curious, inquisitive, trying to do every little like thing they can do, or did they just rush to the room? Did they stay in like lighter areas? Did they stay in darker areas? When this light goes off, did they run over here? There's a lot of like just really data we can pull from the player and infer from the player about what they're like. If the lights go off, do they run to the wall so they can see a little bit, or do they just stay in the dark area and it doesn't bother them? So we'll use all that in the more creepier conversation where you're talking to a camera. And I also haven't really thought through this too much. Let me take a little sip, clean up this chat real fast, and we'll talk about that in a second. Alrighty, so, oh my golly, I just realized this whole time I've been talking with my face on the screen instead of the video that I wanted. Oh no. Alright. Well, I will assume that you heard all that. Let me reset this. We'll speed run through. Sorry about that. Alright, so now you can actually see things. Thanks for sticking with me. As a player, you wake up in this room. You look around. You're like, what the heck? Where am I? There's not anything to do. Go try the door. It's locked. Go try interacting with this. It doesn't do anything. Interact with stuff. Blah, blah, blah. You're going to go over. Eventually, you'll find this lighter on the ground, which will give you this lighter that we're holding, so you can see a little bit better on stream, but you won't start with that. Gives you a little flicker of light so you can inspect stuff. You can see things a little easier. Dark corners. You can't see this without the lighter and so on. Hey, the Cozy Biscuit. Happy to have you here. And once you have this light, you can go on over. You'll be more likely to see this little vent in the ground. You can push this over, and then you'll crouch down and you can peer through here. You'll see some shadows in the room over. This light is what will trigger the conversation with the person in the room over, who is also locked in a room like this. They obviously are going to be very scared. Your first objective as a player is to convince them that you are not the big bad guy who put them in a room. So we'll load up some UI elements in the HUD. Probably give them like a fear score or like a suspicion score. How likely they believe you, something like that. So we want to basically prompt the player to engage in this conversational minigame of convincing somebody that they are innocent through just text. They can't see you, you can't see them. That's the first goal. After that, we kind of lighten the tension a little bit. They just want to like calm down. Your new goal is to tell them like a little bit about yourself, tell them a little story about you, like what you were doing, the last thing you remember, like what were you doing. So in our example earlier, you're a farmer, you were in the fields, you just woke up here. So we use all that as metadata to kind of grab a little bit of information about the player, this persona that they're role-playing as, or if they want to give real-life data, that's fine too, because it's all just make-believe anyway, and we are incorporating it into this game world. So through that story, we'll probably have another bar that you have to fill up of like their calmness or something, and you just keep talking to them until they're calm enough, and that conversation will be back and forth, so we can use the AI that is analyzing what you tell them to learn things about you. That can interact with the conversation AI that's powering their dialogue to prompt them to like ask clarifying questions and ask more specifics if something is ambiguous. For example, if you say like, "Hey, I don't like this place. It feels like a hospital," they can say like, "Oh yeah, I really don't like hospitals. How about you?" Very simple example, but that's kind of the gist. We want to use the two-part conversation here. One is convincing them that you're not a bad guy, more of like a mini game, a nice little introduction, high tension goal to hit, and then after that we kind of bring down that tension curve and learn more about the player. And then after that, the final goal is you'll hear a voice from this camera up here, and it'll be using the information that you gave the cell neighbor, all that information about you. It's going to build up a backstory of like, this is why I kidnapped you. You did this. I don't like people who do this. So it'll be very tailored to what you told them, which I think will make replays really interesting because you can make up crazy stories here and be like, yeah, I'm actually an alien. I was just minding my own business trying to learn about humans and I woke up here. And then you get this story from the camera saying like, hey, I'm with the CIA and I captured you for questioning and we'll analyze your alien DNA, blah, blah, blah. So it kind of builds this story based on what you've told them. If you say like, I don't know, I was at school, I'm in 4th grade, like I want my parents, then here you can get this horror villain saying like, yeah, your parents think you're at school still. I hate your dad, so I kidnapped you and I'm holding you for ransom. Something like that, where the story makes sense based on what you've told them. It's not necessarily asking you to like create the story. It's just responding to your responses in a different goal. So I think it's a nice low pressure way to get the player to effectively create the story on their own without realizing it. But when you're talking to this camera guy, we'll create another goal there where you need to convince them probably to let you out. We'll see if we want any intermediary goals or if that will be enough. Enough for a small demo, I mean. We'll probably at this point add a few more things around the room that you can interact with if you just want little time to relax. I want to play around a little bit with like silence and timing, stuff like that, where I mean in every conversational AI game right now, the flow is you say something, they immediately say something back, you say something, they say something back. But you're in this position of like way less power to the camera person. If you're talking to this vent person, they might pause for a second before responding, but they're gonna generally respond because they're the same sort of power level as you. They're in the same sort of situation. They want more information. You want more information. You want to help each other. But it seems reasonable that if you say something to the camera that they don't like they are trying to get you to admit to something and you're like, no, I don't do that. I think it would be super creepy if they just stop responding and now you're in this room for like a minute or two and there's nothing, like, and eventually you hear them say like, you want to try again? I mean, that's kind of a boring example because it's kind of just you wait around in the room forever. But I think the breaking the expectations of you say something and they will obviously say something back, I think breaking those expectations is kind of core to like the horror genre, and so I think it is a good genre to play around with these different input methods and like flow states for conversation. But once you've convinced this camera, the big bad guy, that they should let you out, I think what we'll have as a finale is some sort of conversation where you need to talk to both the camera and the person in the cell over. And I think if it's not too terrible, since this is a horror game after all, what I think will happen, or what could happen, is the camera tells you, hey, go look under the bed. Both you and them have some sort of syringe or something. Go get it. You go over and get it. It's now in your hand. Maybe replace the light source so it's nice and dark in the room or something. And then the camera says, like, only one of you can leave. And you have to convince them to let you be the one to leave. So it takes all that very first objective of like telling them about yourself, hearing about them. You built up this kind of interpersonal relationship with an AI effectively, and you need to convince them like, hey, I'm the important one here. You should do what needs done in order to let the camera guy let me go. I think that would be a very powerful finale. Probably also the most difficult of all the challenges. And you can probably, I mean, depending on whether there's sound effects or some other thing that happens when they do something, you can just cut to black and run the credits, something like that, or you can have some sort of final twist where you open up the door and something's on the other side. Maybe it's them. I don't know. You pass the test. Congratulations. But that's kind of the full gist of what we're looking at. It's a very short demo, conversational AI in a more horror genre. And yeah, wake up, talk to the vent people, talk to the camera people, talk to them both. You win. Easy. So I think we'll build it now. Obviously, I have built a little bit of just the environment here, but we haven't really built any interactables. That is obviously a first step that we should do, but I want to take a quick look at the player's stuff and see if there's anything else we should be building, because there probably is. In terms of interactions, I think what we want to do is avoid the generic horror game of a cliche of just like clicking on everything and seeing what lets you interact with it. I think what we want to do is create that interaction menu when you're right clicking to look at something. So, for example, if you go over to the door, maybe you can only interact with the door when you're right-clicking on it. Maybe not. Maybe it just makes sense. Maybe it's a little more intuitive to not do that. Yeah, maybe we'll do the interaction normally. But looking around the room, the things that we want to be able to interact with is probably obviously this lighter here. We want to be able to pick that up, which puts it in your hand. Maybe the toilet, if you interact with it, it makes a flushing sound. Why not? If you interact with this door, maybe we do a little locked door sound or a banging sound and say it's locked. And that can also trigger other stuff, like you interact with the door and then the camera follows you for a while. We've got this drink here, which we could always do like the Resident Evil style, like pick it up and turn it around in your hand so you can look at it. But we probably don't want to do that unless there's actually a reason that they would want to see more of it. It's not just like for looks. The room's very empty right now on purpose because I want everything in the room to kind of have a purpose of being there. This guy blocks view to the vent and lets you push it over. The bed is going to hide something underneath it, which you'll grab later. The lighter's here. This guy is just mostly for creepiness. If you look around, he moves sometimes. Just a little player gaslighting. Why not? Maybe we'll give the toilet paper a purpose. I don't know. The sink. That's really all. You can't really interact with the lights because they're too tall. You could technically like push this over probably and like jump on top of it maybe. Stand on it, get to the lights, but maybe you can't. But yeah, that's... So in terms of interacting with things, what we'll probably do is create a little collision sphere in front of the player, and when it collides with an interactable object, we will pop up a little thing with a button to press, like press F to interact or something. And yeah, probably have the interact logic on the actual door, on the vent, etc., instead of having it all on the player. And yeah, I think we can build that. So we have a nice example to follow from. I built this behind the player collider, which is basically just a trigger that collides with stuff when it's behind the player, which is how we do the trolley repositioning itself when it's out of view. So we can just build one in front of the player that collides with stuff, and then if that stuff has a interactable script, we can show a little press this button to interact. We can listen for that interact key and then trigger like interact on the interactable script. So let's take a look at this. Let me turn on gizmos so we can see the actual colliders. And let's go ahead and create sphere for our collider interactions. Let's turn off the mesh renderer so you don't actually see the sphere. And let's move it probably around like here-ish. We don't want to interact with stuff very far away. But it'll also rotate with the camera so we can get angles and things. So this should let us... Well, I need to turn on the trigger so it's not pushing us back. But yeah, it should be far enough out that we could interact with like the bed or the door. This thing. Okay, so let's put that trigger on. I want to double check that that actually does what I think it does and doesn't push us around when we look at stuff. Yeah, okay, good. Because now with the trigger, it doesn't actually collide with stuff. It just triggers those collision events. So previously it was colliding with the bed, pushing us back because of physics. Cool. So maybe the very first thing that we want to interact with is the door. That makes a lot of sense. Let's go put our player over there so we don't have to run over there every time. So that's about how far you'd stand to be able to collide with the door. Let's rename this so we get so it's easier to find. And then let's create a component for interactable. And what we'll probably want to do is end up making interactable like a parent class for all interactable things. And then each interactable object will probably derive from that class. Interactable door, interactable toilet, and so on. So then we can write logic specific to that object. So maybe we don't quite yet put an interactable script on the object itself. Let's just make an interactable interface, but not a real interface because, you know. So here, all interactable objects will have a public abstract void interact. That is a function that we will write on the door, on the toilet, etc. that is the logic for that object. And making them all subclasses of a single interactable script lets us, if you think back to our flow of how we wanted to call these, our collision interactable collider, that will, on trigger collide, check to see if the object has an interactable script, which will include door interactable, toilet interactable, etc. So it'll let us get all those different scripts without having to check for each one specifically. Just some polymorphism. So we probably also want a public key code interact key. I guess E is fine. I think that's pretty normal. What is, abstract class. And that's probably all we need to start. We could do like a radius, like the player has to be this close, or needs to interact for this amount of time before something does it. If we want to like if you were trying to lockpick a door, you'd probably want to hold the key for X amount of seconds before it actually completes. But that logic could also live in interact and so on. Let's go ahead and let's just see what other variables it suggests, because, you know, overlords and stuff know best. Is interactable is probably true. Is there anything that we want to not be interactable at first but make interactable later? Probably like the vent. We don't want to make it, we don't want to be able to interact with it until after you've gotten the lighter. So yeah, we'll keep that. Is interacting as false. We'll keep it just okay, just to see what else is suggested. So this is probably fine. Any other functions it suggests? Update. Yeah, I guess that does make sense. We probably don't want to put that in each of the child classes. On trigger enter, I think we don't want that on this class. I think we want it on the trigger class, but or on the trigger collider. But I do want to see, so others tag, we do want to make sure that this guy's tagged player, because that's what we'll be interacting. And if we, let's do a public bool showing interaction prompt. Let's do showing interaction prompt true. That's what will display the message of press this key to interact with this object. But for now, I just want to output something to the log to see if this is triggering correctly. So what we should see when we first load in, it shouldn't print this because we're already interacting with it, or we're already colliding with it. But if we move this player back just a tad to where we're not interacting with it, this guy does have a box collider, which is good. So we should be able to hit that He does not have an interactable script, so what we'll do is give him a locked or an interactable locked door. I guess maybe an interactable door script makes more sense, and then we can just have an is locked flag on it. Doesn't really matter because this is the only door, but it does make sense. If we want to let the player out, there might be other doors that are interactable to like open and close the door versus it just being locked. So this is an interactable, and we want to define those methods. Interact, and for that we will also just do a little debug log. So this guy has interactable door on him. Interact key, it is interactable. And so if we walk up to it, we should see this. It is interactable, so if we walk up to it and then also press E, we should call that interact and see this. So let's double check that that all works as expected before we go further. You can see the console over here. If we walk up to the door, we see nothing. Hurrah! Not at all what we want. Why? Where is our collider? Collide with the door. Main door is not set to, well, we don't want it to be trigger because then the player could walk through it. And that's not at all what we want. It did call trigger enter. So yeah, what I think is happening here is we just have the logic on. We want this on our interactable collider. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's make sure that works as expected. We will say player interactor, interactor, interactor. So this guy has a trigger sphere collider. So that is where on trigger enter should live. And so other is now us. What we really want is interactable. So if the object that we're interacting with is that, we want to show the interaction prompt, and then what we probably want to do is track all these interactables when we enter and when we exit, and also be listening for the interaction button to interact with all of them. So we'll do that. So everything that could be interacted with, we want to add that. We can go ahead and show the interaction prompt on it as well. And we also want an on trigger exit that removes it. Yeah, that's correct. So now in our update, that's where we want to listen for the input key to interact with it. And if we get that key, then we want to call interact. But a good question there is, thanks, kitty. Good question there is, should the interaction key live on the player interactor, or on each individual object. It's a little bit cleaner if it's on the interactable, because then we can just listen for that key itself and say, if the player is pressing E, loop through all these interactables and interact with each one. Otherwise, the correct way to interact would be to loop through all the interactables, get the key to interact with it, and if that key is pressed, then interact with it. So in that case, we're looping over this every update, which is probably fine. It's not too much worse than checking for key presses every update. You're just checking for several key presses with a loop around it. I think we can do that. We'll see how. It's a small demo. It'll be fine. No need to prematurely optimize. Let's say for each interactable in live interactables, if input.get key down, let's go ahead and switch that ordering for a nice little bit of premature optimization. If that interactable is interactable, which maybe we actually want to, let's move that down here as well, just to make sure that our loop, we're not unnecessarily adding a bunch of stuff to it that we can't interact with anyway. So that'll potentially make our list that we're looping over every update a little bit smaller if there's something that we would be able to interact with but we can't. So here, for everything that we're currently close enough to interact with, if we are pressing down the key to interact with it and it's interactable, then we interact with it. Let's go ahead and test that. Let's make sure this has... Alright, it's got a log. So we want to see that first message saying something, I don't remember. Trigger enter, trigger exit. That does not seem correct. But if I press E here, we do get that interacting with main door. And I see. So we still get it when we walk away, which is why the trigger enter, trigger exit is not properly cleaning up that list when we leave the exit or leave the collision. Should be adding it here, removing it here, adding it here, removing it here. So let's debug that. Just because we do want to keep that nice and clean, we don't want to be able to interact with stuff from across the room. Seems like nasty bugs. So here, on trigger enter, on trigger exit. Let's move this guy back. Not that guy. Let's move the whole player back. So we don't start colliding. Okay, we're not colliding. Trigger enter and trigger exit did fire. Why? They're not... What are they colliding with? Let's say from other.gameObject.name. So let's double check that they're actually colliding with the main door object, which they shouldn't be. I mean, maybe our colliders are extending to like the camera or something. Player capsule is what we're interacting with, which should not have an interactable object, but this guy is colliding with this guy somehow, unsure how. Collision shape looks pretty correct, but Oh, you know what? It's fine because it's not actually adding it to the list. I don't know why it's colliding with it, but the list itself should be fine. I think we can actually, yeah, live interactables. That's what we want to see adding and removing when we collide with the door, which it is not doing. So, on trigger enter, does that belong on the sphere collider? Let's look at, we have this guy, which changes its transform and rotation when it collides with the behind the player trigger, which has the trigger. I think what we will see is this script for interacting with the door should actually live on the door, and this script on player interactor, it should also live in that interactable door script. So let's double check that. I feel like that's kind of what we did, but let's just throw these guys here. We don't need to do that. We just want to see if these debugs get triggered when we collide with the door. So our trigger exit and enter from player capsule is fine. I guess, yeah, we can see why it's colliding. When you look down, it collides with the actual capsule itself. So that's not an issue. At least we understand. But if we clear this and go look at the door, walk in, nothing. Let's see here. Does this have trigger set? It does not, which is what I would expect. This also does not have a trigger set. It does not have a collider though. Oh wait, it does have a collider. Can we make that collider larger? Just make sure that we're not doing something funky. Okay. Wait a second, is it? So it triggers from our behind the player collider, but not our in front of the player collider. So I guess this, oh, yep, that's it. We don't have a rigid body on this, which is necessary for the physics engine to take that into account when doing the colliders. And we're going to set is kinematic because we're not going to move it. No gravity on it either. Let's double check that these look the same. They do. That makes sense. So now we should actually see, fingers crossed, if we go and collide with the door, trigger enter from main door, and trigger exit from main door. We do have that in 2 places now, so let's take it off of this guy. And let's leave it on the player interactor. And let's move these logs into the loop so we don't pollute the console as much. But now we should see a lot less garbage and more of what we want. So we're not colliding with the player anymore. In the console, we are colliding with the player, but since the player is not interactable, it doesn't go to the console, obviously. If we walk up to the door, trigger enter from main door, we can see we have a live interactables. Cool. And so now, if we press E, interacting with main door, it is triggering twice, we'll look into that. But if we walk away from the door, press E, Still interacting with the main door, but I think when we figure out why we are interacting twice, it's this guy. It's not going to interact twice, and it's also not going to let us interact from the other side of the room. Because this script here basically just said every frame update, if the player is pressing the key and this is interactable, interact with it, which is not at all what we want because we're managing that from the interactor now. So, fingers crossed, this should all be correct. We go in and enter from main door, exit from main door. We see the live interactables updating. If we press E when we're on it, we interact with the main door. It does it once, that's correct. If we walk away, we press E, nothing happens. Perfect. So, let's go ahead and a few things we can do now. We can create a UI label for a key to press to interact. We can do the logic for an interactable door, which I think we will hold off for now because we want to do play door banging sound and do play maybe show door is locked message, which we need to wait until we have some UI for displaying messages. Let's go ahead though and throw in this little locked flag that we talked about earlier. So we will, we'll do that real fast. We aren't going to have any unlocked doors for now, but for a locked door, which this is, that's where we'll play our door banging sound, our door is locked message. And let's just say, oh no, you shouldn't ever be here. Cool, so the UI seems relevant here to build next. Let's go ahead and look at our canvas. All we have right now is our squint bars, which when you right click, you see the kind of field of view get a little smaller. You're squinting, you're looking at something real close. We just want to do a little more of that like claustrophobic feeling when zooming in on something. So if you were to interact with this door, where should the message of the door is locked appear? We can literally put it anywhere. We can put it right in the middle of the screen. Maybe that makes sense. We can put it in like a little event message queue like some games do. I guess it doesn't really matter. Let's just throw it on the canvas somewhere and we can move it around later. The other thing we should do is a canvas element for displaying what key to press to interact with things, and I think that should probably go in the middle of the screen. So maybe we do that in the middle, like top, just above the half line, and then messages that we want to display is middle, just below the half line. So they'll kind of be paired together logically. So let's take a look at this canvas. Let's add we don't really need a panel. Let's just throw some text in, say interact button prompt. And we will say, we will populate this from the code, but let's write it out just to make sure the size and spacing and stuff is correct. Press E to interact. I'm a little curious why our font size is -99, but that seems fine, I guess. Is this backwards? Oh, do we not even have Text Mesh Pro imported? I guess not. Let's import that real fast. Cool, so we got it center of the screen. Let's make sure it's anchored right to the center. And let's center the text within. I think we can make that font just a wee bit smaller. Maybe even, yeah. How does this look full screen? That seems fine. We'll do a sprite for the key codes and insert that in instead of a quotity, but for now this is fine. Could even be a little smaller actually. So you walk up to the door. Yeah, that seems like a reasonable size. Press E to interact, and then let's just offset it slightly to the top. Maybe about here-ish. And let's anchor that in for responsive resolutions. And then, does that really center the screen? It looks, I mean, I guess the door's off center. So now let's duplicate that. Let's move it down. And let's just say the door is locked. And for this, maybe we can do a larger size. Let's call it interact response. I feel like there's too much spacing between these. Now that we've got the font sizes nailed, let's go ahead and clear these out. If we auto size this from like 24 to 48, that should be fine. So we'll move this guy up. We want to, let's hold off on respacing those because we want both of them more in the center, which was about here, I guess. Alrighty, and now let's update these guided grid lines. Looking good. Cool, so we will just build references to these in our interactor. Let's go ahead and rename this because it's a little bit more of a thing now. Interactor. Let's go ahead and add some public text mesh pro. I always forget whether UGI or just regular is the UI one, but I think that's correct. Text Mesh Pro UGI interaction response. So what we'll actually do is have interact return a string, which is what we will put in the response. And these guys will return a string. And empty or an unlocked door, we don't really need to display anything. We can play an animation and that's clear. So we'll go ahead and also plan for being able to not display anything at all. So here, let's add in our references real fast. We got our interact button prompt, interact response. It is a little bit odd that multiple interactable objects could have different buttons to press, because we now are displaying a single message saying press this key to interact, where if there were two objects, they could have different keys theoretically. This is probably a little bit more in depth than we need to do for this demo, so what we'll do is just, if there are any interactables, we will grab the first one's key to display. So let's create a private void show interaction prompt for a specific interactable. And so here we will say if live interactables.count is greater than 0, then show interaction prompt for the first one. Otherwise, we will say hide interaction prompt. Again, this is a little bit inefficient because we could have like a flag that says, well, actually what we should probably do is just, when we add an interactable, then we show the interaction prompt for that interactable. So when we first go into the collision, it will show that prompt. We don't need to keep re-showing it in the update. When we leave that collision, it'll hide that prompt. There are some edge case bugs here. When you get multiple objects overlapping each other, but again, I think that's fine. What could happen is you on trigger enter the first one, which displays its interaction prompt, and then without leaving that one, you on trigger enter a second one, which shows its interaction prompt, which is correct so far. But then when you leave, or if you on trigger exit either one of those, it'll clear out the prompt entirely rather than reverting back to the other one. So I guess we could just say, like, if live interactables.count is greater than 0, if there's any left, then we show interaction prompt for the first one. It doesn't matter, just a valid one. Otherwise, then we clear it entirely. Okay, so show interaction prompt for an interactable. That's real easy. We're just setting the text. Interaction prompt.text. Press the key to interact with. We don't really need the game object. I guess we could. I don't really like, I like having title case on my game objects, but I don't necessarily want that. Press E to interact with main door. But you know what? It's fine. Let's do that. Because I think it's better than just saying to interact. Might not be clear what they're interacting with. We do want to make sure that that fits. So let's say with main door. Yeah, that'll fit. Yeah, it fits pretty decent amount. These guys we will clear out though. because we don't want to display anything before this controller starts displaying stuff. For hiding the prompt, obviously we are just setting it to empty. String.empty does not exist. Sure it does. Is it lowercase string? Yeah. Cool. So where exactly are we actually interacting with things? Here. Okay. So we want to do string interaction response is equal to that. And then our interaction response, I don't want to clobber that, so let's say just response. So now when we interact with an object, it will return a string, and that string gets displayed in our second prompt, in our second label. And then we also want to hide that after like 3 seconds, 4 seconds or so. Maybe we fade it out over time. But for now, let's just say hide. We'll do that. We can start a coroutine. I think we can just. Can you set a timeout? How start interval or something? You know what? This is fine. We'll just do that. Generate that, and then generate the code for it. Wait 2 seconds, and then set it to empty. That again technically has an edge case bug of if you interact with something, it'll display the response. If you then immediately interact with something else, it'll display the response. Or I guess a better example is you interact with some object A, you wait 1.9 seconds, you interact with object B. 2 seconds after that first interaction, it will clear out the response from object B. So what we want to do is just clobber any existing coroutine that would clear it out. Let's say coroutine. Public coroutine. How do we want to do that? I think we can store it somewhere and depends on if this gets reset to null. Also, why is this an error? Cannot be an iterator block. That should be an IEnumerator, I think. And then let's say clear any existing reset response coroutine. Can we do that? Stop coroutine. Exactly. That's what we want. Because if it's in this wait period and we stop it, it shouldn't continue on. So I guess this guy can then reset itself to null. So if we think through our edge case bug now, you interact with object A, it triggers this coroutine. This is null at first, so nothing gets stopped. It triggers this coroutine, which gets stored here. This waits 2 seconds. In the meantime, you wait 1.9 seconds. You interact with object B. This is not null, so it stops this coroutine before it clears out the text. The new text gets displayed, and then we wait 2 seconds to replace that text, or clear that text. So that should fix that edge case, actually. We don't really need to test that for now because we don't have two objects even to interact with, but this code should be correct, I promise. And you know what? We can even say we can't. Oh, we can. Is this code correct? Fair enough. We'll come back if it's not correct. Cool. So this should be enough code that if we walk up to the door, we should see this prompt. If we then press the interact key, we should see the door is locked, and then that should clear out after 2 seconds. Let's give it a shot. So we walk up to the door, press E to interact with main door. We press E, the door is locked. Spoopy. And it clears itself after 2 seconds. I think maybe like 4 seconds is better, but we'll also play some sound effects here. It'll be nice. Cool, so that is really easy interact system. We'll use that on the vent and the toilet, are the two main things. So let's go ahead and let's make that 2 seconds configurable. Let's say public float response reset time in seconds. Let's make that 4 seconds. Let's make sure I didn't just set it to 2 in the editor and then override it immediately. Let's clean up some of these components, put our nice custom scripts at the bottom where they should be. And let's very quickly add an interactable toilet class, and then we'll add an interactable vent class. So the toilet class will be a nice little example of why we spent the time to build this forward-thinking, like interact with whatever, supporting multiple interactables at once, very generic system. Because now we can go ahead and just copy interactable door, call it interactable toilet, throw this on the toilet. Right, we gotta actually change the name of the class. So this guy gets a interact key of F for flush, if we can find that in this giant list. And it will update the logic for that real fast. We don't need an is locked. We will actually say interacting with toilet, and we're going to go ham on the logic of this toilet. We will say public audio source or audio clip flush sound, public float time to refill tank in seconds is equal to 6 seconds. So we also have a refilling sound, and when you interact with it, we will check to see if it's currently refilling. So we want a public float refill time remaining, which means we want a update function that checks to see if it's currently refilling. If it is, subtracts that, and we don't need, well, we might need this actually if we want to do stop refilling sound. Can we actually stop that? Does it have a stop method? Probably an audio source actually. Audio controller. You can have multiple audio sources in a scene, right? I don't remember. But for that, we will say audio controller.stop. And so when you interact with it, if, let's say, private bool currently refilling, return refill time remaining is greater than 0. Stay with me here while I jump all around. So if it's currently refilling, we keep refilling it. When it's done refilling, we stop the audio. If it's currently refilling, but not currently refilling, then we want to flush it. So here, what do we got here? We set the clip on the audio controller to the flush sound. We play it. We set the refill time remaining, and then we set the refill sound. This we want to wait until flush sound is done playing. And it's probably not the greatest way to do it. I am very new to audio settings, but what we can do is flush sound.length wait, and then set our clip to the refilling sound and play that. Again, this needs to be an IEnumerator. I'm not sure why it auto-completes to string, but now, if we're not currently refilling, we can just go ahead and flush and return you flushed the toilet. Easy peas. We don't have any audio actually in here, so what we do want to do is say if audio controller is not equal to null, and if audio controller is not equal to null, just so we can test it before actually setting up the audio. Nothing else should break. This guy, I guess. So now we should be able to flush the toilet as soon as we add a collider. This guy's got a box collider, no rigid body. This guy has got a nothing. Box collider doesn't need a trigger. But I don't know that we want a box collider per se. We want a polygon collider maybe. Or, and I guess we could do a box collider. We'll just, what's the best collider here? Doesn't really matter at all, it's a toilet. We'll do a box collider. And let's go ahead and edit that collider a little bit. Looks good. Looks like a toilet you can flush. Let's go flush it. Press F to interact with toilet. So we got our new interact key. You flushed the toilet. Perfect. Okay. We probably want a new font for this, but we'll do that another time. We did forget flush sound out length. Right. So if flush sound is not equal to null. I mean, we probably don't even want that. We do want the error because we want to know if a flush sound hasn't been set. So we'll leave that for now, but it works. So that's good. Actually, lastly, the one other thing we want to do is make this lighter interactable, and we'll have that toggle the lighter you're holding. We'll do that real fast. So let's say interactable lighter. We could make it even more generic of like an item you can pick up, but I think this will be, it's a very specific item because it's something you're holding. We're going to toggle another object. So we will say public game object lighter in hand. Take all this logic out from the toilet. And what we're going to do is just pick it up. We toggle lighter in hand dot set enabled to true, and we destroy this lighter's game object. Easy peas. And I guess we can say you picked up the lighter. I mean, it's obvious that you did, but it's fine. So this lighter needs a collider as well. We'll give it a box collider that is huge. And actually fits it somehow. We do actually want it slightly larger than the lighter to make it a little easier to interact with, but it does not need to be nearly that large. Maybe something more like this. And technically this is going to be something you can step on, and you might see it. Like if you're stepping over it, it might wiggle the camera a little bit. Let's go look. No, we just step up it correctly because we're using the character controller. But, right, it doesn't have any logic for it yet, but let's take a look. Let's see, we got a box collider. Can never remember. Does not need to be a trigger. Let's make this a little taller, and let's go ahead and give it our interactable lighter script. That is spelled differently, right? Interactable lighter, interactable door. I can't believe I've done this. How do you spell this? Interactable or able? I do want it to be an adjective. Interactive. Urban Dictionary, not a good source. Doesn't really matter, probably just want to be consistent. Interactable. That's what we will use. Let's update the class names using Visual Studio's rename functionality, so it automatically updates all of the references to it as well. Interactable. What's the one I'm missing? Interactable lighter. That's... What am I missing? Did I just misspell the file name, I guess? Cool. Alright, so our lighter on the ground should now be interactable. We want to add the reference to the lighter in hand. Lighter prefab, lighter goes here. We'll use E to interact with it. And you know, we probably don't need that showing interaction prompt to be public. So let's just let's do that. And what we will do is toggle this guy off, and then we'll go pick one up. Why? Oh. Is it because it's not accessible? Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. We can make it public. Cool. Let's go pick up. Well, let's look around the room a little bit before we have the lighter. Get a little sense of how dark it is. So way more dark on this side of the level when the light goes out, which is nice. Maybe we want to... Is this too far to be able to interact with the door? There's so much space to be able to move closer. Like, this is the maximum range. You could be up here. Maybe it's fine. So I like having that light flicker because you can run back to this side of the room. But very occasionally this side of the room will also flicker. So you might find yourself in a completely dark room for a second, which is nice. Let's flush this toilet. Cool, we flushed the toilet. Can we interact? So it's a little bit far unless we're like standing directly on it. So I think what we want to do is maybe give it a sphere collider, so it goes up further without being a blocky thing you have to jump on. But you can see, like, I'm higher up in the air because I'm on top of this lighter right now than if I step down. You can step over it, but it's, if you know that it has a little collider there, it's very obvious that you're stepping up. So let's go ahead and let's take this guy. Let's get rid of his box collider. Let's give him a sphere collider, and maybe we can we make it a trigger as well? Because it would be nice if we didn't need to like step on top of it. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, maybe we do the same with the toilet too. But this is much nicer. We could also give interactables a custom verb. So, for example, press E to pick up lighter prefab, or press F to flush toilet, press E to open door. I think maybe we add that real fast. Press E to interact with lighter. Let's actually, though, I do want to test to make sure that we can pick this up. You picked up the lighter. Cool. So now we have light. And maybe that's also a good time to like get these lights when they but leave them off for longer or something like that. but we do have enough light to be able to interact with this vent, which we will add next after we add that verb. Let's go over to interactable. We will say public string verb. And then let's see here. Let's start with interactable door. When we create our, I guess here is where we want. So press the key to, we want the verb here. And so for each of them now, let's take a look at this. So our verb is now public string verb. We want it all lowercase, and we want to include the, what's the name of the preposition? Open the door. And we want to make sure this overrides. Public new string, is that the syntax for that? Hiding is intended. Okay, so now our sentence should construct for the door. Press F to open the main door. And for lighter, we want to public new string pick up the lighter. Yeah, that's fine. What is this error we're getting already? Yeah, I know, I want to override it. Is this not how I... Public abstract string. Can you have abstract variables? No. Oh, but I could use a property. Properties are Greek to me as a non-C# developer, but it's probably fine. Let's see here. Let's say I want to override the verb string in the parent class in each child class. How do I do this? So new just hides it. It's like a reverse protected or something. So I can just override. Public override string verb. That does not seem... Override's not valid. Alright, to the internet. C# override variable from parent class. Value from parent class. You cannot, but you can override properties. I could use a function for it, but alright, fine. We can do that. So our interactable gets a property instead. Public virtual string verb. And we give it a default. So we'll just say interact with let's move it on down, or I guess up. Let's move it down. Keep it separate. And then with our lighter, we instead want public override string verb. Nope. Get pick up the. Move that guy down as well. And so here we just want our property instead. I kind of hate that that syntax now. I guess consistency wise, I probably should use properties for everything, but that's so like Java boilerplate, it feels like. Doesn't feel like it really gives me a lot of anything. Feel free to correct me in the comments though. Let's go through and do the rest of the interactables now. So let's actually just grab this. Interactable door. Open the... We've got our interactable toilet. Flush the... Our lighter, door, toilet. Okay. And if we didn't have one set, we would just say interact with. So it would build sentence as build, or press F to interact with main door. That seems fine. Okay, let's just go in, make sure that that works. Let's check out our lighter once more. It's very dark in here, right. Press E to pick up the, press F to flush the toilet. We'll rename these game objects so they don't have random capitalization, but press E to open the main door. Yeah, that seems fine. And then press E to pick up. And for other things we can have, like for this trolley, we can say like press E to inspect, and we'll just say something about it. I am noticing that when we toggled this object off, we did not remove it from the interactables array, which is a bug. So in our player interactor, the trigger exit never fired because we just toggled it off, I guess. Is there a way to manually trigger that exit? Probably. Maybe, I wonder if we toggle the interactable off. So it probably doesn't fire because it's... We do trigger the onTrigger exit because it no longer exists, but the component is probably disabled when the whole object is disabled, so this doesn't happen. So what I will do for this great problem to solve is be right back. Use the restroom, and I'll be back in 1 minute. I will. Thank you. Alright, alright. Welcome back. Let's jump back into code. The bug we were thinking about is we have this lighter here, which let me just go ahead and rename to lighter since we're using the game name or the object name in the text now. But basically when you pick it up, it's disabling this and the on trigger exit never fires. And it's necessary that it fires because we are using this live interactables array to determine whether to show the press F to pick it up or whatever. So if you see here, pick it up, the press E to pick up the lighter continues to exist even when we walk away because it's still in the live interactables array. So one thing I want to check real fast is whether this fires and it's just not going in the loop because it's not interactable. If we see this, it's a very easy fix. What we can do is just basically, instead of this, we check and see if it's currently in the list and remove it, if so. Let's say trigger exit 2, since we want unique debug lines. So let's do that real fast. Hopefully we get a trigger exit 2. So we have it from the bed and the capsule. Just now realizing bed is spelled bad. But if we pick this up, we do not get it from the lighter. Okay. So, won't be the easy fix. I do want to call that bed though. I grabbed a bunch of these assets from the asset store, just some free assets, mixed and matched them a bunch, and I promise all these typos are not from me. They are from internet strangers. So what we can do, I think, is we can just have on the interactable lighter script a reference back to the interactor, and we can remove it ourselves. It's a little bit of a hacky way to do it, but it is a very straightforward and readable way to do it. And there's not really going to be a case where it's unexpected behavior or like you expect it to stay in the list because it was removed. It's just kind of implementing the expected behavior. So I think that's fine. Let's have our interactable lighter. And we will say public interactor, player interactor. And then here we will say player interactor.live interactables.remove this. So that should do it. Let's set that reference correctly. We got this guy, our player interactor needs to be here. And let's double check that that works. As a side note, I'm not using my headset for a mic this week, and it's so weird to not have headphones on. I keep feeling like there should be audio or something that I'm missing out on hearing, but there's not, obviously. So I'm glad this microphone's working a lot better. Maybe I'll have some smaller earbuds or something and use that when we start working on audio, maybe another week. So now we press E to pick up the lighter. We should hope that message goes away when we press E. Picked up the lighter. Collection was modified. Right. So that's because we're looping over the interactables here. and that interaction is actually modifying this loop. So we could change that to a for loop. That could introduce a edge case bug where the loop is actually modified and we skip over the next one, because if, for example, there were 2 elements in the array, the lighter is the first one. We have our array where for I equals 0, that 0th object gets interacted with and removes the 0th object. The next iteration of the loop, I would be equal to 1, and that object that was the first, or the next in a 0 indexed array, is now at index 0. We would basically skip over it, or get an error, I guess, if the loop actually ran for a second time. Realistically, it'd just exit the loop, because now the count of the array is 1 and our index is 1. But since that happens on update every frame, I feel like that's fine if we skip over displaying the next thing to interact with for a single frame. So we'll just go ahead and do that. For int I is equal to 0, I is less than live interactables.count. And what we'll do is just say interactable able is equal to live interactables at I. And now the logic is exactly the same, except I have to spell things consistently. Interact ables interact able. Okay, let's just go ahead and say interactable. We still have a few references here, so let's just hit them all real fast while we're in it. Interact able and okay, that should hopefully be all of them. Let's just double check. Cool, everything is actually correct. And also this loop, we should now index of 0, the interact removes it from the array, but we don't reference the 0th element in the array anymore. So it should be fine. Let's double check that though. So we go over, we get our message, press E to pick up the lighter. We pick up the lighter. We still pick up the lighter, or we still display that message. That seems strange. Live interactables of 0. Oh, because we're not actually calling on trigger exit. We're just doing this. So really what we should do is put all this in a function that this calls, and also we can call from the interactable lighter. It's getting a little more spaghetti now, but it should be fine. Clear interaction for interactable. And so that is going to get all of this. And so now we just call that function from here as well, which is a little bit nicer than trying to update the array directly anyway. So let's test that. E to pick up the lighter, we pick it up, it's gone. You picked up the lighter, cool. And that'll go away in 4 seconds. We don't get the E anymore, or the message, or anything. The collider is gone as well. Seems good. Okay, so we are slightly over the 2-hour mark. However, that took longer than expected. I do still want to add the interaction to the vent as well. I think we'll just kind of block it out for now because next week we probably want to look more into Cinemachine and camera control, and when we interact with that, we want to like pan the camera down, do a little bit more of a scene where you're just sitting in the corner, maybe wrap the camera back to show the player a more third person, frame you as like you're on the left side of the screen, the vent's on the right side of the screen, and then maybe do some speech bubbles so you can read the text instead of just have to listen. Have also speech bubbles so you can type instead of talking. I think we can dedicate a whole stream really to thinking through how we want like the ideal UI for interacting with LLMs with. Because there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of things we want to accommodate for. We want to have like chat histories. We want to have text or voice input with transcription. We want to have text output from the NPC from their generated text. So fitting all of that in a UI that is not overwhelming and is not just like the kind of placeholder text box that we had in You Are Not Alice. I think we can spend a lot of time getting the ideal, like it looks and feels good. And then we can probably reuse that in a lot of games if we build it well. So I think what we'll do for the rest of this stream is also just add in a quick interactable air vent here that will trigger a Cinemachine event and set up the scene for going into that more in-depth conversation interface. And then we'll call it. And maybe as a little bonus, we will just add a quick little inspect the stretcher. No, we don't need to do that. If you get close, you're going to push it out of the way. And the room is small enough, like, you'll be able to find the vent eventually. I don't really mind if the player spends some time feeling trapped and unsure what they're supposed to do and explores the room in more detail. Like, there's one objective in the room. It is to talk to this vent. And you do need a lighter to do it, so we'll probably on the vent itself say like, oh, you feel some metal thing on the wall, but you can't tell what it is if you don't have the lighter yet. But if you do have the lighter, then you say like, then you trigger the Cinemachine. Like you go sit down in the corner, you have the lighter next to the vent. It's nice and flickering lights, so there's movement, which is another pain point from previous implementations of this conversation interface. Is it's very static. But if we have the flickering light and the movement, we've got some shadows flickering around. Maybe we can orient the scene such that this camera is like in the top left corner and it's going back and forth. Sometimes it's pointing at the player, sometimes it's not. I think if we can, there's a lot to do really in setting up a nice looking and nice feeling scene where you're going to be interacting with an LLM as the primary way to play the game. So we'll spend a lot of time on that probably next week. And just as a quick reminder, I do stream dev streams every Tuesday. We are working on this demo right now. We just started it this week, and we've worked on lots of other demos in the last several months. So if you like this demo, let me know. If you have an idea for another demo that uses AI in a cool way, let me know. I put all these streams on YouTube now, so go check out the Chroma Golem YouTube. I'll get it linked in the description, but Chroma Golem is our game studio that is focused on exploring how these new AI technologies can be used in games, exploring how we can unlock new game mechanics or features or ways to interact with games that weren't previously possible. So having these sort of like free-form conversations with NPCs is a great example of it would be really, really difficult. I mean, it's possible, but difficult for a developer to plan out infinite different dialogue trees for you to interact with them. But with LLM behind the scenes, you can allow that player to basically say whatever they want and have the NPC respond within the context of the game world. And what we're doing with this demo is a lot more kind of railroading towards a specific goal. So we don't want players to just be like, hey, do you want to play rock, paper, scissors over and over? I mean, I guess they could, but the progression of the game is tied to meeting specific metrics within the conversation. So convincing them you're innocent, convincing them it's going to be okay, convincing the bad guy that they should let you out. These sort of like conversational goals that can become a game where you know the end goal, but it's up to you to direct the conversation to get there versus being just presented with 2 to 3 options to choose from, like just dialogue in traditional games. But yes, Chroma Golem is our studio. We have a Discord for game developers. It's linked in the description of this game. I stream every Tuesday. Feel free to follow me if you want. And let's add this last interactable vent script, and then we'll call it, and I'll go back to learning about audio and Cinemachine and fun stuff off stream, so we can have a good stream next stream too. Let's call this an air vent because it gets incorporated into the game text now. Let's go ahead and create an interactable vent. We'll clear out all this logic real fast. Our verb is probably just like inspect. Inspect the vent. We want to be able to check and see if the player has the lighter, because that's a step they need to do first. That's in the game world, the light is what informs the neighboring cellmate that somebody is there. Void has lighter. And we will just say do a reference to the lighter in hand and check to see if it's active, I guess. And the difference between active and active self, right, if we disable the parent, active self is still true. Already defines a member called update, right, because does interactable have an update, I guess? No? Okay, that's fine. Well, I guess it does because it's mono behavior, but it's all good. Let's see. Inspect event, interact. If we have the lighter, then return. You can now enter the vent. You sit down beside the vent. Okay, so we'll fill this in a sec, but if we don't have a lighter, let's just return, you feel something on the wall, but it's too dark to see what it is. So if we do have the lighter, what we want to do is pull the camera back to third person, pointing at the player. Animate the player sitting down on the floor next to the vent, in the corner. Position the lighter beneath the event. Play a gasp sound, and then trigger the NPC dialogue, which will have text and audio. So we want to also show the dialogue UI. So, is there anything that we're missing here? If we, well, let's fix this bug real fast. Interactable vent inherits from interactable. Why is this interactable vent already has an interact? Right, I'm overriding it. You silly goose. It's an abstract function. We're doing the same thing. Oh, they're all erroring. Wait, interactable toilet? Nah. Nah, man. Okay, so if we walk over to this vent without the lighter, we get nothing because it doesn't have a collider yet. Let's add that collider. Or I guess it does have a collider. It does not have interactable vent. E is fine. Lighter in hand is this guy. So now we will walk over to the vent where it is nice and dark. E to inspect the air vent. You feel something on the wall, but it's too dark to see what it is. It's too dark. Let's push this out of the way. Still dark, but you do get this nice, let's make this full screen. Like you can kind of see that something is there. It's got some reflections, it's got some hard edges. For the most part, you can see something is there when the light is on. Now we walk over to here, we get this lighter. Now we can see stuff. By this point the player will have been told they can press control to crouch, they can move, etc. I can see the vent a lot better. Inspect the air vent. It's pretty obvious if you play any games they're going to be expecting like, oh, obviously we're going to crawl through the air vent. You can press control, look a little closer. Maybe we bring up the crouch height so you can see a little bit better through the air vent. But we can deal with that. But basically what we want to do is we want to, at this point, when you inspect the air vent, we'll say you sit down beside the vent. We'll have the player start here. We will pull the camera back to third person. We'll have the player sit down here. Let's see if I can. I don't know how to pause it while also holding control. Let's do this. Let's. That's fine. We want to also enable some cinematic lighting. Just so you can see the player in this dark corner. We'll still have the light flickering in the background, but obviously it's pretty dark right now. Maybe we unpause until the light's back on. Or is it on right now? I can't actually tell. I think it's on right now. Maybe not. It's very dark. I guess the light is on-ish. Looks pretty off to me. Why is the light off forever? Doesn't matter. We'll look into that. It's probably because I paused the game at the wrong time or something. But yes, we'll turn on some cinematic lights. So this corner is lit enough that you can see the player, but it's still pretty dark. Probably some like low lights that cast shadows maybe from the player onto the wall here. We'll have the lighter near the vent with some flickering lights, which I'm also noticing are not working right now. So maybe the whole flicker script is not working right now. We can look at that another week. But we'll also build this UI. We're going to disable player movement. That's something we should do until we leave the interaction mode. So we will go ahead and say public bool is interacting. And we'll want to toggle that. So if you try and interact when we're currently interacting, then we will want to say is interacting. It's false, and then you to do stand up, reset lights, re-enable movement, etc. And then we'll also return you stand up. Or something nicer than that. So let's give ourselves a few functions we can fill out next week. Public bool start interaction scene and bool end interaction scene. Maybe those don't need to return anything, but all this goes here, all this goes here. Here we can say end interaction scene, which means obviously that makes a lot of sense to have there and here. And we could even build this quote-unquote scene as a literal scene in Unity and load it in on top of this scene, but I don't think we need to do that. But that might be a way to get it a lot more complex and not have to set everything up in a script. I think this looks fine. Let's go ahead and just test it one more time. Make sure we're in a good state to end at. And then we'll call it for the week. So you walk over to this vent, you don't have the lighter yet, you press E, you feel something on the wall, but it's too dark to see what it is, no matter how many times you inspect it. You go pick up the lighter, now you can see a lot better. The lights are flickering again, which is good. You can inspect the air vent. Maybe we want to, let's say, make sure the, what's it called, a stretcher, pushed out of the way. So this guy, if you inspect the vent without pushing him over, maybe we just do the pushing for you, move him over here or something. So now you inspect it, so you'll be sitting down beside the vent, and we should be interacting with the vent right now. So this is, we will probably want to hide the, remove the interactable collider from the interactor. Let's say the vent. So we don't want this message showing the whole time we're in the conversation. But we are currently in interacting mode, so if we were to press E again, you stand back up, and then it'll reset everything, and you can walk back around the room. So maybe, like, we can have the conversation require you to, like, get up and leave and go do something. Like, maybe there's a number scratched on your side of the wall, and he needs you to go get it. Or, like, hey, I have a locked chest in here with a pen code, but I can't figure out the pen. What do you think it is? Or he says, like, oh, the camera told me to get a pen code from you. I don't know where it is. And then you go look and maybe crawl under here, and it's written under here or something. So you can leave the conversation, come back, and it'll keep the state. There's a lot we can do to play with. This room's very empty right now. We can also add a lot more interactable events now that we have this system. And then you can resume the conversation. Eventually you will have a conversation with this guy as well, which you'll trigger just the exact same way. Maybe when you interact with the camera, it will pull the camera back to third person, and you'll just stand in front of the door like, come on, let me out, and then they'll respond. And we can set that up very cinematic as well, maybe with the camera like more over here, so you got the vent in the background between you and the camera, and there's some dramatic lighting. We'll see. We'll do a lot more with the camera next week, I think. Cinemachine stuff. Maybe we'll add audio if I find clips for banging on a door, toilet flushing, etc. And soon, obviously, we're going to add the actual AI component for the conversation and analyzing what the player says and kind of transmuting that into operations on the world itself. Examples of that is like if you detect that the player is, if they say they're afraid of the dark, or like if this light goes off and they run over here, frequently you can kind of infer they're afraid of the dark, so you can manipulate the frequency or duration of the lights going off. Or if they say they're they feel like they're creeped out by the camera watching them, then the camera can track them more often or something like that. So there's a lot of stuff to do with the AI as well. I think that can be an entire stream. So we probably have at least a couple more streams before this demo is done. And it's been a fun one to work on. I don't really play a lot of horror games. I have played some in the past. A lot of times they're a little too gory for me. I used to play like Resident Evil when I was a kid, when it was a lot less like gross horror, more just like jump scares of zombies around the corner, that sort of thing. But I'm kind of thinking that AI probably is a great use for powering some psychological horror and making NPCs feel real, so you build up a connection to them, making interactions feel real so you can kind of be in this space and interact as you would. That might be really powerful for a horror game, or it might be boring, but we're going to build this and we're going to find out. So if this game sounds fun to you, tune in next week. I'll be here at every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. I think that's 3 p.m. on the East Coast. So it's been fun streaming for you guys. I'll be back next week. We got the socials in the Discord, all of that. It's all in the description for this video. So if you're a developer or you want to learn game development, feel free to hop in our Discord. We're always happy to help. We got more AI resources in there as well for generating code or giving you feedback on your code, letting you brainstorm game ideas with an AI built for brainstorming, that sort of stuff. So if that sounds cool, pop on over and I will see you next time. It's been fun. See ya.